Let me share this really quickly. Wait for people to join. Okay, there we go. Hi, Chanello. Okay, so we're going to get into it. I mentioned it on one of my shorts. I'm going to try to do updates every now and then about what I'm going to be talking about. I mentioned it on one of my shorts that I was going to be doing this topic. So, um, I don't know if I know about 5 or 6 women had said that they were going to be buying this. And don't let the title deceive you. If It's called The Power of a Soft Warrior, Fierce Women. And I know that being fiery or fierce is something that sometimes has a negative connotation, especially if someone's wanting to demonize you. But in this world, I'm trying to teach my girls, in this world, we need to be fierce when it comes to things. We need to be fierce when it comes to love for our husbands, love for God, love for our children, love for all things that are good and truthful and honest. Um, we need to be fierce in our walk with the Lord. There's a lot of ways that you can use that. And God gave us all different personalities. He did not make us all to fit into a box. Even throughout the Bible, we see different women with different personalities, different men with different personalities, Peter versus Paul versus, Thomas versus all the disciples all had different personalities versus John, the beloved disciple. So we all have different personalities. God did not make us to fit into a box. However, he did make us to, if we're saved, to have that desire to grow closer to him, to grow in him, to work on our weaknesses, work on our faults. But we can use the personality that he gave us to make a beautiful marriage, to make a beautiful life, to raise great kids. And that's why I wanted to talk about this. I did not know what to expect. So this book was recommended to me after I wrote a post last week. And so I decided to go grab it. It's only like $10 or $11 off of Amazon. But I loved this book. I've made my way through most of it. I have not done every single thing. Almost though. I've almost read through all of it. But I kind of wanted to go through, give a little book review, and then also do the devotional that I did for Liz's bridal shower at our church. That was this past week. We are down to 60 days or something until she gets married in the end of May. So tomorrow they can start saying we're getting married next month. So it's very, very close. So our church hosted a bridal shower for her. So I'm just going to kind of go into my introduction that I gave at the bridal shower. And then I'm going to kind of go through the book. And the only outline I really have is she did a whole thing with the acronym appreciation, because appreciation is so huge when it comes to building our men up, to encouraging our men, to really supporting them. And so she did an acronym for each of the letters in appreciation. And that was pretty much my outline for Liz's devotional. And I'm going to get into that at the end, spend more time after I kind of go through this and give some of the key quotes that I really liked in this book. I highlighted a lot. And so there was just so much good in it that resonated with me, being someone with a firstborn personality. And that's another thing. Birth order plays into our personality so much. And there's some of us women out there that were firstborns. We were born to kind of be the leader in our homes, right? And especially if you're a firstborn daughter, you will know what I'm talking about when it comes to this. We had a lot of expectations put on us. We were expected to have it all together, be perfect, be the leader. And that was how I grew up. It's not something that intentionally happens, I don't think. It's just something that does happen. And even with my firstborn son, you don't know when you first start raising kids how it's going to go. You don't really know what you're doing. And so they're kind of our guinea pig in a way. And you tend to be harder on the firstborns. And I do believe in the Bible that's probably why they got more of an inheritance, was because more was expected of them. And so they reaped bigger benefits from that. So I have a type A personality. I have a naturally leadership type of personality, but I also married a firstborn, and it's the same way with him. He is a natural born leader. But being a leader doesn't mean that he sticks a gun to my head and he tells me, move, woman. No, he leads in a way that I don't want to follow anyone else but him, and that's the way it should be in a good working marriage. So this was my introduction to the devotional for Liz's shower. I said, getting to know Liz over the past year, I've come to know her as a spunky, fierce, beautiful young woman. She reminds me a lot of me and my youth, and I understand why she fell in love with Jace because he is so much like his dad. The same mannerisms and even the looks are there. I think that my husband and I are a perfect match, and we have a wonderful, working, smooth marriage almost 24 years in, but it wasn't because we were just both super compatible. We are both firstborns. We both have leadership type personalities. We both know what we want, and we strive to achieve that. This had the potential to either make a beautiful marriage with both of us knowing our roles and doing them, or a tumultuous marriage, one marked by me trying to change my husband, control him, or dominate him. I am a work in progress, but the bride from over 2 decades ago has come far. I bought Liz this book, and I encourage her to read it. I was talking to her. You are a fierce woman, and with that, you can either build your home or you can browbeat your husband and destroy the home. The choice will be in your hands. You have the ability to be your husband's biggest cheerleader, or you have the ability to cut him down with one look. And women, we do hold that power in our hands. You have the ability to have a peaceful, calm home or one filled with strife and friction. Obviously, he has to do his part and put the work in too, but us women have a lot of pull and a lot of power. We set the tone in the home. One of the biggest things I loved in this book is that it talked about the power of appreciation, and the author gave an acronym for each letter in the word. I wanted to go through all of these with you because I think that gratitude is one of the biggest gifts you can give to your husband. Gratitude for who he is as a person, gratitude for his hard work, gratitude for the house he provides, gratitude that he works hard so you can stay home and raise the kids, gratitude for being the one that he chose out of all the other women in the world. So, and then I go into it. But I will say, I want to give this disclaimer too. With every book that I review, there are things in it that I like, and there's things in it that I don't like. There's things that I agree with, and there's things that I don't agree with. When she gave a little bit of the gospel in it, she slightly used the word repent wrong, which I know people will freak out about. But a lot of times when people use that word repent in essence to salvation, it could have a broad meaning. So they could either mean you have to be sorry about your sin, you have to realize you're a sinner, and then, realize that you're repenting to believe in Christ or whatever. A lot of times, you have to repent of whatever you were believing in to get you to heaven, whether that was good works. Obviously, I believe in repentance of sins after salvation because you're going to have a better life. You're going to have a more fulfilled life. You're going to have a cleaner life. You're not going to be paying for a lot of the consequences that sin brings. However, salvation is a free gift. We just have to realize that we are a sinner, that Christ paid the penalty for our sin, and we have to believe on him and his finished work. If we add anything to that, it's not belief only. It's not faith only. So, obviously, eat the meat and spit out the bones. I don't believe in this philosophy of only reading things that you 100% agree with, because number one, you don't want to get stuck in an echo chamber. You need to know why you believe what you believe. Obviously take caution with your kids and use discernment and all that good stuff. But you also know what influences your kids and what doesn't. As a grown adult, a grown woman, I know where I stand on things. I'm not afraid to read someone else's ideas and opinions, even if I deviate slightly from them. So yeah, but I will say she tells, I would say that this book, probably because there are parts where it talks about intimacy and different things like that, I would let my daughter read it if they're closer to being married, probably not as a teenage girl, obviously, but once they're closer to being married or married, I'd have no qualms with them reading it. So, yeah, she kind of starts out by just giving, talking about the beauty of fierceness. And I like this part that she puts in here because there is, there's men that are very insecure when it comes to women with strong personalities. And I think a lot of it's projection because they see, whoa, this thing is about to break. They see that I have a strong personality and maybe their wives don't have quite a strong personality, but they have a hard time controlling their wives. Their wives walk all over them. Their wives can wilt them with a look, and me with a strong personality, I don't do that to my husband. I'm kind to my husband. I talk nicely to my husband. I serve my husband. I listen to my husband. I do what my husband wants. And so in their minds, they're thinking if I had someone with a much stronger personality like Cassandra, she would just destroy me and she would walk all over me and all this and all that. They have no idea how our relationship even works. They don't observe us in real lifetime. They lurk and they watch my show and they lurk and they read my Facebook posts and they lurk and they accidentally friend request me and then panic and block me because of it. So I know they're watching what I do. But she put in here, let me find it. My husband says it was my fierceness that initially grabbed his attention and drew him to approach me. And I could say the same for my husband as well. At the time, however, he had no idea how his world was about to be turned upside down by one really fierce woman. That fierceness he found so attractive, well, he learned real fast it could work both ways because the fierceness that drew his interest also gave me the spunk to verbally slam him in our first conversation. And that is one thing that you have to remember. You have a lot of power with words, and words are powerful. And this is something I have learned over the years, that they do have a lot of words and they are powerful. I don't care what people say. And she says, men seem to be drawn to fierce women. Generally, men run from the clingy, whiny, weak-willed types. And I would agree. My husband's that way. Perhaps it's the fierce woman's strength of character they admire, or her passion for life. It may be the unwavering loyalty and intense devotion they find appealing. The courageous heroism of a fierce woman has inspired many a great leader. Rebecca Mott's name may not sound familiar to you, but she holds my respect. Her fierce loyalty to her country served to inspire the Patriot Army during the Revolutionary War. She was a wealthy widow. In 1781, the British set up camp at her large estate. 175 soldiers took residence in her home and surrounded it with a trench. Rebecca escaped the Patriots, who laid siege to the British compound. After several days of fighting, the Patriots concluded the only way to force the British from their newly occupied fort was to set fire to Rebecca's home. When Lee, the leader of the Patriot force, broke the news to Mrs. Mott, she responded that she was gratified with the opportunity of contributing to the good of her country. The widow produced a bow and a set of arrows and told Lee to put them to use. The flaming arrows set fire to the roof and forced the British to surrender. The Patriots quickly climbed to the roof and managed to put out the flames and salvage her home. After the victory, true to the spirit of a beautifully fierce woman, Rebecca Mott served dinner to both the American and British officers in her dining room. So that's just one story. But she puts in there the characteristics of a beautifully fierce woman. Her identity and value are rooted in her relationship with Christ rather than a relationship with man. She's filled with gratitude for God's good gifts. Her heart is ruled by the peace of contentment. She courageously faces her fears rather than running or hiding in shame. She's passionate about things that matter rather than living for the trivial. She loves God and she loves others. She's more focused on giving love than getting love. She's willing to battle for a cause rather than shrinking in defeat. She grabs the hem of God's will and doesn't let go. She protects and defends the helpless rather than using her strength to bully others. She is known as a sincere encourager. She's honest but kind. Others feel comfortable in seeking her counsel. She embraces God's word as her ultimate authority rather than being swayed by the voices of culture. She faithfully confronts by speaking truth and love rather than enabling sin by keeping silent. She walks in confidence and humility that flow from her recognition of Christ's work of grace in her life. She has the power to influence and inspire because she lives under the Spirit's control. Her life is lived all out for God's glory rather than the smallness of self. And I love those definitions of a beautifully fierce woman who's in the center of God's will. Now, you can take this, though, as with anything that can be a strength, it can also be a weakness, and you have to be careful. And so this book is all about, just using your strength to, like she says, fierceness can become an asset or a detriment in marriage. And you have to choose wisely what you do with that. And then she always have heart issues. How do you see yourself? And then she puts a list there. Determined, faithful, disciplined, courageous, or aggressive, passionate, bossy, cold, intimidating. There are different words. So you can be either or with these type of things. For those who don't know someone in real life, like myself, and they maybe are on the opposite side of a stand that I have chosen to take, it can be very intimidating to them. And so they will try to paint me as all these bad things. And me and my family just laugh and laugh and laugh. And my church members, because it's so far from the truth. It's almost hilarious. So then she talks about, and then there's the scary side. And she kind of goes into that. Characteristics of a destructive, fierce woman. Okay, so you have to be careful of these. She's established herself as her own authority. Her identity flows from the faulty perception that she's in charge of her life and her independence is her highest value. She's always pulled by the lure of more. Her desires are never satisfied. She's unaware that ingratitude, pride, and fear are the driving components of her life. She's obsessive about things that matter to her. She lives with a self-centered agenda. She longs for love and affection, but can come out swinging if rejected. She goes to battle often, mistaking her belligerence for heroism. She grabs for power, and no one and nothing prevents her from getting her way. She uses her strength to bully others. She may not recognize it as bullying, but her continual criticisms, negative perspectives, and harsh tones can eat away at others like acid. She's harsh and blunt in her honesty and proud of it. She's often involved in conflicts with others. She may claim God's word as her ultimate authority, but her study is merely academic. It doesn't affect how she treats others. She walks in arrogance and pride, but is blind to her lack of humility. She views meek behavior as a sign of weakness. She sincerely believes her personal conflicts stem from others' ineptness, lack of spirituality, or inferior behavior. She's craved power over others and has mastered the art of controlling them through subtle manipulation. Manipulation is one thing I can't stand when it comes to manipulating your husband, when it comes to manipulating your kids, when it comes to manipulating other people. I don't like passive aggressiveness. I don't like manipulation. Maybe it's because there's been times in my life when people have tried it with me, and I just really detest that. Although she may not admit it, her life is devoted to selfish pursuit. She's only satisfied when she gets her own way. She's unhappy with anything less. So then she starts talking about, she kind of gives her testimony about how she realized that she was being very destructive in her own marriage. Okay. So she talks about a couple that they seemed great, but then when she noticed when they interacted with each other, they were very sad with each other, very standoffish, etc. So she said, through a painful process of discovery, I began to realize that our marital problems were not all my husband's fault. In fact, much of the blame fell to me. But it took a lot of painful face-planting events before I admitted this. So she began to find or notice how most of her husband's comments to her were filled with sarcasm and thinly veiled resentment. And if you as a wife, if you start noticing that that is becoming the way that your husband is talking to you, just kind of very sarcastic, very like there's almost resentment behind his words. Pay attention. Is it something that maybe, how has your tone been with your husband? Have you been criticizing him? Have you been putting him down? Have you been demeaning to him? Pay attention to that when it comes up, because it might indicate a problem that's been going on. And, a lot of the blame might fall on you for that. So, and then a dear friend had the courage to ask me a penetrating question. Do you think you intimidate your husband? And that kind of got her to thinking. Okay. So, chapter 3 is about, where is the man I married? And she starts out, hey, why'd you take the expressway at this time of day? Don't you know this is the worst time to take that route? Why didn't you go that back way? We'll be late. Another husband crumples in defeat under his wife's correction. Once again, his mental recording plays in his head. Why even attempt to make your own decisions? You never make the right one. You never measure up to her expectation. Why even try? If you could hit rewind to begin this woman's day with the question, are you planning to emasculate your husband and shut him down with your opinions today? She'd probably reply with something like, no way. I want him to be the leader of our relationship. I'd never treat him that way. Another couple caught in the fierce woman / fearful man cycle. I don't think any of us ever plan emasculation. It just seems to happen before we know it. Ever been there? Why do we do that? So she's very open and honest in this book about her struggles and just, whether single or married, most women struggle with this issue of control. But men can become paralyzed by fear when faced with a controlling woman. They cave to a common default position, passivity. There we go. One definition for emasculation states to deprive of strength or vigor, weaken. The fierce woman can suck the heart right out of her man through emasculation, or she can put steel in his spine through admiration and appreciation. We have so much power in our hands when it comes to our husbands, to making them feel better about themselves, just like they do with us too. Okay. But I forgot to put this disclaimer out there. I want to put this disclaimer out there too. I am only talking today regarding wives and how they can make their relationship better with their husband. I know that some men in marriages, they have serious flaws. They have serious problems where you could be the kindest wife. You could be the sweetest wife. You could do everything that you're supposed to do. And because of his sin nature, maybe his lust, maybe his pride, maybe his arrogancy, maybe he's just a plain old jerk, it's not going to change him. So I always tell this to the single women that watch, you've got to be careful with who you choose. Now, that does not mean that, oh, well, you chose him, you're stuck with him, you have to stay with an abusive man. I'm not talking about that, okay? But when you get married, don't go into marriage expecting to change him, because the more you nag and the more that you belittle him and the more that you demean him and the more that you criticize him, the more he's going to shrink in himself. You're going to emasculate him. And she talks a lot about that in this book, about how women have the power to basically make their man emasculated. And that leads to him being passive, him not wanting to take the lead because he's tried before and you've just cut him down. Most women like a strong leader. I know I do for once. I want the prince to save me, right? I want to be saved. I want my husband to lead. And most women do, but you can't nag him into that. You can't. So there is a desire to control because of the curse. And she talks about that. So, for example, a fierce woman's power of influence can evolve into the power of pressure. Her gift of encouragement can morph into the habit of nagging. Her keen intellect can degenerate into a sense of superiority. Her passionate exuberance can become overwhelming intensity. Her godly wisdom can become his worst nightmare as an intimidation factor. So often the desire to control stems from a woman's deep longing for affection. She desires a man who will passionately pursue her and is willing to fight for her heart. Other motives for control might include the fear of loss or harm, the desire for safety and security, the need to fix a problem or find a solution, the hope for improvement of people or circumstances. We forget that we can't make our husbands into the romantic man of our dreams. We also cannot change him. So I'm telling my girls the same thing. I'm even telling my boys the same thing when it comes with their bride. You fell in love with this girl. Now, don't marry her thinking that you're going to change her after marriage, because we're pretty much who we are. We're pretty much who we are. And God has to change a person. We cannot change a person. So, so she goes through some more of her own testimony. God wants every marriage to be so characterized by unity, tender moments, lots of laughter, adventure, excitement, and passion, humility and self-sacrifice, forgiveness and grace, that when people see it, they can step back and say, oh, that's what real love looks like. I get it. One of the moments that meant the most to me was a couple years ago. Abby had gone with us to work out, and Tom and I, we share a lot of the same interests and things. So we go to work out often together. And we were both near the end of our workout, and we had chosen 2 treadmills by each other. And we were just walking and talking and, working out together. And Abigail was behind us on the step thing. And she snapped a picture real quick. And she sent it to me and she said, this is literally all I want. Like, she looks at her mom and dad and how much we like each other, how much we love each other. And she's like, this is what I want. And that's all I've ever wanted, is to have a relationship that my kids want. It's not to have a relationship that they go running from or that they're terrified. I don't want to get married because my mom and dad were married and it was terrible. I wanted to exhibit to them a working, happy marriage, one that they would they would want. And my girls adore their dad and they love their dad. And I don't think any of them would ever do something knowing it would bring pain to him because he has their hearts. So, but he sees that he has my heart and I have his heart. And that makes a huge impression on kids. So talks about being careful. Okay, so there's so much good in this. I'm going to have a hard time even making it through all of this, but how do we emasculate our husbands? And she gives a bunch of things like ego deflating treatment, criticism that demeans him, comparison with other men, questioning his decisions regularly, mothering him or smothering him, destroying his dreams. We can emasculate our men through manipulation. Behavior modification, similar to puppy training techniques. She talks in here, I think it's a Doris Day movie, actually, if anyone remembers this movie, about how when this girl got married, her mom gave her like this puppy training manual and told her to just treat her husband like it. And she started doing that, and it was great until the husband figured out what she was doing. Like he found the book or something, and then he was all offended. But it was like this comedy, but it was really funny. I can't remember what it was called, but I think it was a Doris Day movie. I'm not totally sure. But we can manipulate through exerting pressure to get him to get my way or get him to take care of responsibilities, hidden agenda behind syrupy sweetness and batting the eyelashes, withholding sex or using it for bribery. That's a big manipulation tool for women, and it's a big no-no. Through aggression, taking forceful action to get what you want, pushy attitude, tone, and words, hit and run tactics, setting up an emotional minefield for him to weave his way through selfishness. We're self-focused, self-absorbed, self-serving, prone to self-pity. By trying to control him, by dominating him, fearful of outcome, if not calling the shots, attempting to change our husband. By unrestrained words, too much talking, tone plus facial expression, body language that communicates he's an idiot, worthless, or can never do anything, rolling our eyes at him, sighing, jerking away when he tries touching us. That's all goes along with words. Using words as weapons. Leaving your husband hungry for attention, ignoring his needs, not making him a priority, letting yourself go. That can be a big one, letting ourselves go. And I know we're all in different seasons when it comes to raising kids, but we should try to restrain ourselves when it comes to appetite, how much we eat, different things like that. Anything you can do, I can do better. Competitive rather than supportive, superior attitude, intimidating, taking charge, impatient, unwilling for my husband to act, taking over his areas of responsibility, saying he's the leader while you make all the decisions. Independent living, pursuing separate interests, living in your own world through romance novels, Facebook, internet, friends, church, keeping secrets from him. Obnoxiously opinionated, convinced yours is the only way, treating preference issues as absolutes, unteachable and unwilling to listen. And then no margins for him. Spending time with your man is squeezed out by your overfilled schedule. He's not an important priority to you, and he knows it. No time to build an intimate emotional bond through date nights or weekend excursions. So that is all ways we can emasculate our husbands, and that's no bueno, right? Not good. So then she goes into the deadly three, which she kind of goes into even being careful with same-sex relationships when they start taking priority over our own spousal marriage, which should be, with our husband, it should be the most important relationship there is. And there have been instances where she's counseled people where they did enter into a very lustful, sinful lifestyle with a same-sex friend. And they recognized how wicked it was. They repented, and then they went and they worked on their marriage with their husband, and they got it right amazingly. So yeah, that's a whole thing, which was, I've never really thought of that, but I guess it can happen. So she writes about a lot of desires that enslave you. And that's all to do with that sexual sin, patterns of pride. So yeah, then the life-giving trio. I think this might be the chapter where they had a very turbulent first decade, and she realizes now most of it was her because she was emasculating her husband. And she had to come to grips that she was a huge cause of much of the conflict in her own home. but she talks about how humility affects a fierce woman. She recognizes God is God and she is not, so she can release control to him. She recognizes she's not always right, therefore she doesn't demand others see things her way. She's teachable and open to input or correction for spiritual growth from others. She's willing to be held accountable after being confronted with blind spots. Because she recognizes God's worth and value, her submission to him motivates her to treat others with kindness and respect. And she's a soft warrior. Her strength is not diminished by humility, but is refined and tempered by it. She is soft clay in the potter's hands. So she said, I realized that my tone, facial expressions, and attitude were a source of painful emasculation in my husband's life. I came to grips with the ugliness of my own heart. So then she talks about God's empowering response to humility. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in this book. And she is very much so for the biblical roles in marriage. You know, she realized that she was not respecting her husband. She was not looking to her husband as a true leader because she was trying to have all the control, and she knew that wasn't right because that's not the way that God designed marriage. Let's see. So then she gets to the appreciation part. And this is, I think, a lot of chapters are spent on this, you know, just all the different letters in appreciation and the acronym. Lots of them are. So she starts this on chapter 6, and then she's already in through chapter 9. She's talking about it. She talks a lot about the importance of life-giving words versus angry words. And she gives this acronym HALT. Don't say things when you're any of these 4 letters: hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, because they have a way of spilling out and they make us regret things that we say to our husband, because words are powerful. And I've always said that, and I'll always stand by it. So I'm going to go into the appreciation part that she wrote. That is a lot of the chapters. She talks about her own realization that things were not good. And it was mainly her fault because of how she'd been treating her husband. She went home, she apologized to him, she repented, she asked God's forgiveness, she asked for accountability, she asked for his forgiveness. He was very wary at first, but he eventually just blossomed, basically, because he became the man that God wanted him to be, because he was no longer daily being belittled by a woman, by his wife. He was no longer being put down. He was no longer in that passive role where he was just trying to put up with her and exist, because husbands can get that way with their wives. And while they had both determined from the time they got married, we would not divorce. And he was man enough to stay with her. But a lot of men aren't. A lot of men are like, I'm done with this. Why am I with someone who constantly emasculates me, someone who constantly cuts me down with her words, someone who has no respect for me, someone who will not let me take leadership, someone who makes all the decisions, and someone who calls all the shots, and they're out. Thankfully, he wasn't. And they've gone on since to have decades of just beautiful marriage, and they're working together in complete harmony. She knows her role, he knows his, and it's just very inspirational. And I really like her writing style because I feel she's very helpful and she speaks truth in a kind way, versus Lori Alexander, who has a very demeaning, very haughty attitude. I feel as if Lori Alexander, the names are so similar. Lori Alexander, I feel as if Lori Alexander, she got married, was a horrible harpy to her husband. And then she's like, oh, this isn't right. The Bible says I shouldn't be this way. So then she just turned around and just turned her ire like towards all women of the earth, because she's so down on women. And I do think Lori Alexander has a very fierce personality as well, but she hides it under the guise of like just berating women, berating. She's very, very, very puffed up and very condescending of anyone who doesn't see things as her. And I feel like she comes across a lot. It's more of a gentle strength, and she is very humble about her mistakes. You know, I was this way and God just pretty much slapped me upside the head. And she gently encourages women, you know, to change if they are doing these things to their husbands. So she gently encourages them too, which I like her writing style a lot better than Lori Alexander's. So now we're into the appreciation thing. So she says A stands for admire and affirm your husband. From the time they are little, boys look to the females in their lives to affirm their choices, their accomplishments. Take charge of the way you think about your husband. You are marrying him, so there are things you admire about him. Don't forget those. Focus on those things. Show him affection, show interest, flirt with him, thank him, encourage him. So those are all very, very important, and those are under admire and affirm. The P in appreciation, the first P is put yourself in his skin. So say thank you more frequently, listen to him, watch for signals. Men can't always put into words what they're feeling. They're not as chatty as us. They're not as good with their words, maybe, as we are. Now, I will say my husband's a better speaker than I am, but I'm better at writing it out. So oftentimes if he has something that he needs written out, he'll ask me for help. Oftentimes if I need a topic suggestion or something, I'll ask him for help. So, he's just a better speaker than I am. But when it comes to just telling you how they're feeling, maybe the emotion of the moment, they're not as good at putting that into words as we are. So watch their actions and the way they treat you versus what's coming out of their mouth most of the time. Hand out compliments. Accept your man. Don't seek to change him. Tell him, you've got what it takes. You can do this. I know this is the job for you. Let him know when he has done something that you like. Remind him of his past accomplishments versus bringing up all his past mistakes. If he's made a mistake, he's made a mistake. I've messed up. My husband's messed up. One thing we don't do is we don't constantly bring those up. That's very detrimental to both of us. So don't bring up his past mistakes. Ask him about his job, be interested. So you know what he's doing for the family. You know what he's going through. Maybe he's interested in talking about it. Maybe he's not. For me, I know my husband's always been interested in talking about what goes on at the job site and stuff. And sometimes it's not the most interesting to us as wives, but it's good to know what he goes through on a day-to-day basis so we can see what he's doing to provide for us. I think that's important. And then become acquainted with his hobbies and maybe join in. The second P, pray like you mean it. Pray for his personal integrity. Pray for hope. Pray for peace. Pray for love and pray for joy in his life. You need to pray for your husband. R in appreciation is release your prisoner, because as wives, we do have the power to hold our husbands captive and not in a good way. So forgive him when he wrongs you. Don't hold him hostage with his mistakes. Don't hold his past mistakes over his head. Don't constantly berate him with those mistakes. Don't, talk about him constantly. Don't put unrealistic expectations on him. And this goes back to not comparing him with other men. He's your husband. He's no one else's husband. You married him. You chose him. So, enjoy him. Don't play the if only game. If only we had done this. If only we had done this. If only you had taken this job. If only you hadn't done this. You can't play the if only game. Don't try to fit him in your little box. Let go. Don't try to control him. Empty suspicions. Don't hold him hostage with suspicions. Don't make himself prove his integrity to you over and over and over again, especially if he hasn't done anything. The E stands for encourage his leadership. If you want your man to lead, step aside and let him. She goes into stories of women who have said that they wanted a spiritual leader, but anytime they say that, they get impatient because he's not doing it on their timetable. He's not doing it the way that they thought he should. So they get impatient, they try to step in, and then he loses all hope of ever doing it. So he just gives up, back in that passive mode again. Some women want men to take the lead, but then they step all over him with lack of patience. Appeal to his God-given desire to serve as your leader. And every man has a God-given desire in him to be your protector, to be your warrior, to be the leader that God wants him to be. But if we're constantly nagging him and pushing him and telling him, you need to do it this way, you need to do it that way. No, that's not the way I was talking about. He's going to get back into that passive state, and he's not going to want to at all. Speak words that will inspire him. I know you're the best one for this job. You can do it. Your ideas are so creative. And then let him know how thankful you are for every tiny speck of godliness you see in him. Thanks for taking us to church, babe. I appreciate that. Thanks for praying with us. Thanks for putting our spiritual needs first. Choose your battles carefully. And if I could tell this to every new bride, I would until I was blue in the face. Hold your tongue. Be willing to wait. Wait on the Lord. Pray. Prayer has more effect on your husband than your nagging will. Prayer always works. And maybe God wants you to wait. Maybe God's trying to refine you. I would say that marriage is the number one refiner. in our lives. Marriage is being one with someone who sees us at our worst, but also sees us at our best. He knows all our faults and he chooses to love us instead. I know all my husband's faults and I choose to love him. I choose to overlook those. I choose to not let them annoy me. He chooses not to let my weaknesses annoy him. He chooses to love me day in and day out, share a bed with me, sleep with me, share a life with me, raise kids together, make decisions with me. He includes me in every aspect of his life as I do with him. So you got to be careful about your battles that you choose. You don't want your marriage to be a battleground all the time. And it can become that way for a lot of people. And then the C in appreciation, contentment. I think this, for me personally, I think contentment is the biggest key to happiness. Contentment is surrender's sweet spot. It's rooted in peace and its reward is joy. So grab onto your husband and don't let go. Grab onto your marriage and don't let go. Fight for it with everything that's in you. I, in appreciation, invest in him. Study him, become knowledgeable in his interests and passions, growing and understanding of him, spending time getting to know him at broader and deeper levels. Honor him, serve him, reconcile with him. I've often said, and it's so funny because one thing that's just worked in our marriage and we do often is I know my husband's food preferences more than anyone else on this earth. I can look at a menu and I can order exactly what he likes. So it's just through years of cooking for him, years of making his favorite dishes and years of making his steaks. I know exactly how he likes it cooked and, medium rare. That's how he likes it. I know exactly the type of potatoes he likes and exactly the way he likes it seasoned. And one thing that we've always done in our family, and it's not something that I beat my chest about or I even set out to do, but it's because we started having kids right away. And if you're not fast at getting the food goes fast. So if you want first, seconds, thirds, you got to go fast, right? So now when I say dinner's done, everyone comes to the table, dad, they all sit down, and my husband he takes a spot and I serve him up his food. Everyone knows dad gets his plate first. It's just in a big family, it's just best to do it that way. So he doesn't even go over to where the food is anymore. It's just he sits and he waits for his food. But I know exactly how he likes it seasoned. I know how much portion size he wants on his plate because I've gotten to know him and I've studied him over 2 decades. And if you're in a relationship and you get divorced and then you start over in your another relationship, you're not going to have that. You're not going to know your husband as well as someone who's been married 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And marriage gets so sweet the longer you get into it. And it's tough at the beginning because you're just figuring each other out, right? And you're figuring out hot button issues that you want to avoid, red button issues that you want to avoid. You're figuring each other out. But after a decade, after 2 decades, after 2.5 decades, it's just comfortable. I know him and he knows me and I know what makes him happy. And so I try to do that. And he knows what makes me happy. So he tries to do that. And it's a working relationship and you do things that work for your family. And I think it just shows the kids too that dad's important. Dad's been working hard. Dad needs his food, so it's just something that's always worked for us. And it's not something I've ever made a big deal about. It's just something we kind of comfortably slid into. I don't know. The A in appreciation, the second A, is accept him. Acceptance means approval. This means not pushing your social personality on him, providing a safe and comfortable atmosphere for him to be himself around you, releasing him from the pressure of trying to live up to an idolized version of him, communicating acceptance rather than, why can't you be more like so-and-so? Accepting his family and his background. And that is a big thing. You got to accept his family. You got to fit in with his family. You got to do everything you can to get along with his mom and get along with his dad and get along with his siblings because that's important to him. He shares a tie with them and, vice versa, obviously, but I'm talking more to women with this whole thing. So the whole social personality, that could be something like you're an introvert, but you married an extrovert. And he wants you to do stuff with them, you should try to do stuff with them. Not expecting him to sit at home every single night and not ever go out because that's your personality, right? You fell in love with him, so you kind of adapt your life to his. And obviously, it goes both ways. He should have a little patience with you or understanding if you've been out every night for 7 nights in a row and you just want to stay home. A loving husband would be like, yeah, let's just stay home. Not talking about him, I'm talking about you. So a lot of women, though, they'll try to change. Oh, why can't you be more like this person? Or why can't you be more like that person? That's one of the worst things we can do. How would you like to be told that? Why can't you be more like Susie down the street? Nope. I know for me, part of him loving me is accepting me for who I am. And he's done a great job with that. So the T in appreciation, treat him like a man. God has placed within men a masculine heart that responds to danger by rising to the challenge as a warrior. Men thrive on serving others as rescuers. Men are driven by their God-given responsibility for providing for their family. And I know all the Snow White remakes out there and everything is all down on masculine. What is it? Toxicity, or what is it called? I can't remember what that word is. Toxic masculinity. That's it. And I, for one, love that men are men and women are women. And yeah, call me a feminist all you want. But I'm not. I happen to I need my man. I desperately need my man. And I love that men are masculine and they will ride in to save the damsel in distress. Um, and I think, obviously God made us with different hormones. Men are primarily testosterone driven and women have more estrogen, and that is the way of things. And it's that way by design. So I do celebrate men and who they are and the fact that they take leadership, and that might trigger all the free ginger people that watch me. I just found out they talk about me on free ginger or something, which I thought they only did that with famous people, and I'm not famous at all. I just have such a tiny, tiny platform. I don't know why they would waste their time on me. Um, but yeah, I know that triggers some feminists, but I need my husband desperately, and I would not be the person I was today without him. So, inspire him, respect him, validate him, and celebrate him. Just they need that from their women. We can either make them feel like the smallest human being in the world, or we can inspire them to do great things for the Lord, for others, for ministry, for their families. We can inspire them. And I would rather be an encourager than someone who belittles people or brings them down or tears them down. I want to build. I don't want to tear down. And there are verses that talk about a wise woman buildeth her home, a foolish woman plucketh it down with her hands. Not exactly word for word, but look it up. That it is a very biblical concept that we have the power to build or the power to destroy. And then the I, in appreciation, intimate connections, and godly wives cultivate a sexy attitude towards their husbands. Don't defraud one another. Work on this part of your life. And I know it's one of those taboo things not talked about much in Baptist world, but you do need to be that for your husband. You need to keep that a priority. And I know it's hard when you're nursing and you're pregnant, but you don't want to frustrate him. You need to attend to that, as that physical need is the only one that you can fulfill. He's not supposed to look outside of the marriage bed for that. So if you're the only one who can fulfill that, it does need to be a priority. And I don't think it's talked about enough, because I do think that when you have a solid foundation in the intimate, it kind of spills over into all other parts of life. It spills over into how your husband feels towards you and how you feel towards your husband. God put that marriage relationship and the physical relationship there for a reason. And one of those was just for bonding, because that's the only thing that happens between the two of you. And so thank you, Beth. She did it word for word. Every wise woman buildeth her house, but the foolish plucketh it down with her hands. I love it when she's in the live chat, because I will paraphrase a verse and she'll put it down. So thank you very much for that, Beth. So yes, I don't think it's talked about enough, but I do think it's important. And I'm going to try to teach my daughters that this is an area where they alone can fulfill that desire for him. And so it needs to be priority. And men feel a lot more loved when women make that a priority in their marriage. And you're going to feel closer to your husband too if you make that priority. So, only a word. When we deliver untempered verbiage to men, it can come across to them as a slam rather than opinion, especially if they're a little insecure. It can really come across as a slam. So just remember that words are powerful. Use fewer words. Don't ever use the D word in your home. Eliminate it from your vocabulary. No D word, no talk of divorce, no talk of separation, no talk of divorce. It's not even in your vocabulary. So, and we're not talking about if there's abuse. Once again, if you are being beaten to a bloody pulp, there might be a time to separate and get yourself to safety and alert the authorities and get help and all of that stuff. Not talking about that. Always have to throw that disclaimer out there. And then learn to halt. I mentioned it early. If you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, press pause. Shut your lips. It's really hard to retract words after they're out. It's a lot easier just not to say those words. So if you are any of those 4 things, revisit it, come back. And if you still feel that way after you've been fed, after you've cooled off, after you've had a heart-to-heart with one of your besties, after you're refreshed, then have that discussion. But if you're any of those 4 things, it's better to be quiet. And I think that's one of the most important things I've learned through the years of marriage. Not everything needs to be said that's running through my head at the moment. Sometimes I just need to pause. And a lot of times it's this. I don't really get hangry. But the tired and the angry, if something bad happens in life, maybe I could see that. So I don't really get hangry. Hunger doesn't really affect me in that way, but I'm a faster. I fast a lot. So it doesn't really affect me, but definitely the angry or the tired. Yeah. And she tells a story in there about how she almost goes off on her husband because a couple pies get like destroyed when she had specifically said, please bring the pies in first so that, these stray cats don't get into it. And he didn't. And then they got destroyed and she'd been looking forward to pie all the way home. And she said she was just about to release an angry torrent of words. And he said, wait, before you say anything, remember the angels are watching and God's watching. And so she said, because he called on the whole, like we're being observed or whatever, she really, that kind of made her stop. And she said she was grateful for it later because she didn't release the angry torrent of words that she wanted. And she would have cut him down and belittled him and demeaned him, by saying those words. So she was really glad that she paused. Yes, I would say, Beth, she said also, if we are in pain, we need to pause. And I would say for me, not so much physical pain, but different times when I've gone through really heartbreaking things, when I've had people close to me die. Not so much like I'm angry at him, but even just thoughts. Sometimes we can think things that aren't great to verbalize, even when it comes to just wondering, why, God, why did you do this? Sometimes we just need not to verbalize things and we just need to restrain ourselves. So yeah. And it could be pain, physical pain. It could be heartache, different things like that. So, but use life-giving words when it comes to your husband. And then N, the last one, never give up. So surround yourself with truth-speaking friends who help you stay committed. Maybe you need to get out of the yes, girl Facebook groups that are like, I'm a part of, just out of curiosity, I joined this one like stay-at-home moms and totally not Christian. And I stayed in it mainly just for research purposes because I like seeing some of the posts that come through and some of the advice. It is truly abysmal, some of the advice that the world gives. And it could be so much as my husband's grumpy and he snapped at me. You need to leave his behind and you're better than this and you deserve more than this. And I'm like, we all have bad days. Like we all have bad days and you're going to seriously leave your husband. You're going to cut off this covenant in this marriage and like drag your kids through a divorce because he had a moment of when he was hangry. Because for me personally, my husband does get hangry. I don't, but he does. And he said something grumpy to you and you're literally throwing it all away for that. So it's crazy. Some of the advice out there. What if he did that to you when you have a grumpy day? Because we all say things we regret. We all snap at times when we shouldn't. We all use angry words. So there's just not many people willing to put up with much. And when I say put up with much, just day-to-day life, your car breaks down, your dog runs away, and yeah, you're going to be a little grouchy. So you go to bed and you try again the next day. And there's been oftentimes when I've said that, like, I'm really upset right now, but let's just go to sleep and we'll talk about it tomorrow. That's the thing that works best for my marriage. Maybe you're the type that likes to stay up and figure it out. She kind of talks in there about not letting the sun go down upon your wrath. But then she does put in the disclaimer, but don't stay up till 3 a.m. either, trying to figure it out. And that's the thing that does not work for us. Because my husband has always had a work schedule. Even working at the church, he does not sleep in. He gets up early, he's gone early. Most of the time by the time I'm awake. So because he's getting up earlier than me, he needs to sleep, and sleep is important to him. Sleep is important to me. I don't function as well without sleep. So we've come to realize that not everything needs to be fought at midnight, at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. So sometimes we know we're going to work on it the next day because neither one of us is going anywhere. The D word is not in our vocabulary. So we'll just go to sleep and we'll work on it tomorrow. But the times when that even happens is very rare. It's very rare that we even argue anymore. It's you kind of just find your comfort zone, I guess, when it comes to red button issues. You just avoid them if you're hungry, if you're hungry, if you're angry, if you're lonely or you're tired. Just avoid those. You don't need to go there. So yes, I love that quote, Beth. She said, time for the Anna Green Gables quote. Tomorrow is fresh with no mistakes in it. And then Miss Stacy says, yet. And that's true. Yet. There are no mistakes in it yet. It's a fresh day. So yes, Marta, the first years of marriage are a little hairy. And, you think about it, my husband and I were both 20 when we got married. So we were just babies. Now that's like, oh my goodness, we were babies, but we grew up together. And there's a lot of bumps in the road when it came to figuring out our roles within marriage, And I'm just going to say I'm a lot more even-tempered. I'm a lot more like the godly fierce woman now than I was when I first got married. There was some bumps, there was some things, there were some good hard truths that I needed to confront myself with in those early years of marriage. But if you just are not stubborn, if you're open to God's leading, staying in the word, listening to good preaching, then you are going to be open for correction. Also, if you're married to a godly man who will correct you at times, you need to be open to that. Correction is not this horrible, bad thing. It's not, we're both married to each other, and there's going to be times when a wife lovingly needs to entreat her husband. Maybe something's not quite right, or there's sin in his life, and she kind of can point it out. And if he's a godly man, he's going to be open to that. He's going to take it to heart. And I'm not talking about nagging him. I'm talking about lovingly entreating him. There is a time and a place for that. But then also, ladies, your husband needs to be able to tell you if you're doing something he doesn't like. And that has happened through the years. So we can either become mad and enraged and bitter, or we can take a good hard look at ourselves and say, yeah, I was kind of being that way. I need to change, and we need to change. And that's going to lead to a very happy marriage, a very comfortable, working, balanced marriage where he is loving you like Christ loved the church, and you are reverencing him and submitting to him and doing his will. So, and at the end of the day, your family knows. Ask any of my kids at home who's leading the home, and they'll let you know it's dad. But mom is second in command. And when dad is away, mom's word is law as well. But most of the time, I know my husband so well, I know what he would like or what he would not like. So if the kids come to me, mom, can I do this? Mom, can I do this? Your dad wouldn't like that. And I'll say no, because dad wouldn't be comfortable with that. Maybe necessarily I wouldn't mind, but I know my husband's thoughts. I know his will. I know his, like the heart. I know his heart. And sometimes I just know if he would like something or wouldn't like something. So no, let's not do that, because I don't think dad would like that. Or I'll say, ask your dad. And whatever dad says, it goes. That comes to everything in the home. What's allowed on the television, that comes to what activities are allowed. Everything, pretty much. Obviously, I'm there to make decisions when he's not, but I also try to make the decisions knowing what he would like. So, yes, that's very important. And then cut off every source of temptation for extramarital relationships. This goes obviously for men and women. Have boundaries, set standards in place. So for us, this is very specific things that we've done in our marriage. First off, pretty much anyone could get on my phone. All my kids know my password. There's nothing hidden. um, Actually, if there are people who reach out to me for advice when it comes like different women, if they've come to me for counsel, if it's a very sensitive topic, I will delete the emails so that my kids can't happen to stumble on them, different things like that. But with my husband and I, he's never alone in a car with a female. I'm never alone in the car with a male. We'll either have a child with. He doesn't do counseling alone in here. In fact, there's windows in each of the doors to the rooms. He wants to avoid the appearance of any evil at all. Even when it comes to text conversations, maybe with men in the church, it's always me, the man, and his wife. Because I've even known of pastors who started texting someone in their church regarding like different things around the church, different ministries, music, different things like that. One text led into another and led into another, they ended up having an affair. And the pastor was found out, had to step down, is disgraced. His wife divorced him. Horrible things can happen just from text messages that start out innocently and then they just rapidly evolve. So there's different boundaries that we set into place as far as that goes when it comes to communication with other people that we're not married to, when it comes to being alone with a member of the opposite sex. I think people often call it the Billy Graham rule. And Billy Graham was highly criticized for it his entire life, but I actually like it. It's not that I think, oh my goodness, my husband is like going to fall into these temptations if I'm not around, but it's about avoiding the appearance of evil. The Bible does tell us to avoid even the appearance. And then, take heed lest you fall. There's been many a man that thought he was above, I'm never going to fall, and he does. So it's just better to have those guidelines in place. When tempted to give up, revisit God's big picture for marriage. And then keep your heart closely tied to the cross and yielded to the gospel. I do think that marriage can be a beautiful picture of how Christ loves the church on earth. And that's one of the reasons God gave it to us. God didn't want us to be alone. She talks in there about how can you truly be monogamous, according to the world standards. I believe you can. I believe it's the most beautiful picture. I do think like people will use Old Testament examples. Well, why did David have so many wives and why did Solomon have so many wives? There's things that were allowed in the Old Testament, but not necessarily things that God condoned. Also, just because they were allowed did not make them the best things. Look at all the problems that Solomon's wives caused for him. Look at all the problems that David had with his wives. And it caused a lot of consequences. It caused a lot of problems. Look at all the problems with Abraham and, Sarai and then Hagar. So many problems that we're still dealing with today. So just because God allowed it does not mean that he condoned it or encouraged it. And I do believe in the New Testament, he's laid out a very good pattern for us to follow. Leave and cleave, one man, one woman with each other until death. And if we know our biblical roles and we do them, we'll have a beautiful marriage and we'll have a picture of how Christ loved the church here on earth. And I think that's what we all need to shoot for. Also, I've always wanted a marriage my own kids would want. And I don't want to scare them off of marriage because it's such a beautiful thing. And I want them to desire that themselves. So those are some of the things that have kept me continually trying to make my marriage better. And in making my marriage better, I have to look inside and I have to say, how can I use my personality in a way that benefits my husband, that benefits our marriage? There was talk of me on Free Ginger, and I was reading some of the comments, and they were talking about how I seem like a firecracker. And I am in a way. I don't fit into anyone's little box that they want to put me in. That being said, I can use my strengths in a way to raise strong children. And I can use my strengths to encourage my husband to be better and to do bigger things and, to be his biggest cheerleader. I can use those. That doesn't mean that I live in a perpetual state of like going to war or going to battle. But when it comes to certain things that are important to me in life, I'm going to fight for those things. And that would be teaching on the home and the family, I'm teaching on being a godly Christian, on being a godly wife, on being a godly mother. All those things I'm very passionate about. I'm also passionate about other women having those good things in their life, and helping them to be better wives and better moms to their children. And that's kind of what I'm passionate about. So yeah, when it comes to hills that I'm going to die on, I'm going to be choosy with my battles. But sometimes there is a time when it's time to stand up and say, I don't approve of this. This is what the Bible actually says, and this is what the Bible teaches. So, and if my husband has given me his blessing on that, then it's no other husband's business what I do, because they're not here seeing how our relationship works. But I'll tell you who is my kids and my adult kids. And you can ask any of them and they'll tell you. So they'll give you a tell all with what goes on in our home. And just ask any of them. I dare you to ask them and they will tell you. So with that, I would encourage this book. There are some things in it I don't agree with. Obviously, I'm not going to agree with 100% of anything anyone writes, but there are a lot of good gems. She encourages you to, let me read the teaser. No matter whether you're an extrovert or more introverted, Kimberly Wagner believes women are created to be a compelling force. You may not see yourself as beautifully fierce or even slightly strong, but what if God has placed a powerful fierceness within you, within every woman? Kimberly admits that her fierceness became a source of conflict in her marriage, but the relationship dynamic has totally changed. The relationship dynamic totally changed when she discovered her fierce strengths could be used to encourage and inspire her husband. She invites you to come alongside as she takes an honest look at a destructive relationship and casts a vision for the transformation God can bring to troubled marriages. And I do think there's a lot of truths in here that if women could just grab onto, they would see a miraculous transformation in the way their husband talks to them, the way he treats them. It's not like this magic pill. Oh, I'm doing this because I want my husband to do this. No, it's taking a good hard look and saying, God wants me to treat my husband this way, so I am going to do it. God wants me to be this way towards my husband, so I am going to do it because that's what's right and that's what's good. So a lot of good stuff in there, a lot of good gems. I would definitely encourage it, especially if you have a stronger type A personality. I think it's good to be reminded of those things, even if you have been, working on that, working on being a better wife and all that stuff throughout the years. So I hope you all have a good week. I'm hoping to have my friend on, Nicole, next week or the week after. Not next week, because I will be in Kentucky. We might need to take off next week unless we record it here at the church in the afternoon. That's a possibility too. Might do that. But if it's not next Monday, I'll be in Kentucky. It'll be the following Monday. So we'll see what I can get worked out this week. So I hope you all have a beautiful week. Go love your husbands, love your kids, love the Lord, and be better this week than you were last week. That's all I ask. So I will see you all